morning, everybody. Well, as introduced, I'm Henk. I work for EcoMetrix. 2 years ago, we started assisting the CBA at looking at what the implications would be of the carbon tax as proposed by the National Treasury on the clay brick sector. We found a number of interesting, interesting results. The amount of rands per brick equivalent, the price would go up for different type of firing technologies, the sort of carbon footprint of the entire industry. Today's presentation is a little bit broader, but it also addresses how far we've gotten on the carbon tax and representing the clay bricks position towards National Treasury with the intention to influence the policy design as best as we can. In the sense that it's broader and a bit wider, it covers more than only the carbon tax. It looks a little bit at the sort of global and local trends on an energy and carbon, from an energy and carbon perspective. I think globally, when you read the newspaper and watch the news, the energy trend and the carbon trend, two things sort of stick out. One is that, there's a bigger drive for energy independence. Russia, the United States have big ideas of becoming energy independent. Well, the one energy independent, the other wants to more export to different parts of the world. And as part of that energy independence, several energy extraction technologies have been now implemented on a very much larger scale than was the case in the past, like fracking, very large scale renewables, solar, PV, those kind of things. On the climate change side, a couple of years ago, I would say almost a decade ago, there was a lot of activity on a global political level about climate change and what the impacts would be on the world our children and our grandchildren would live in. With the financial crisis in 2008, that sort of went a bit more on the back burner. But now we see that, now financially, at least in the West, things are sort of settling down. Climate change and climate change mitigation has risen again higher up on the political agenda. Locally, we have all sorts of problems, right? One of them is that we sort of in the middle of an energy crisis on the electricity side. We have re-entered an era of load shedding. We constantly hear in the news that the two large coal-fired power stations that should sort of resolve at least part of the electricity crunch are being delayed when it comes to becoming operational. In addition to the fact that these are coal-fired power stations, our president or the government actually announced that they would reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as a country by 34% in 2020 and by 42% in 2025, which is ambitious. I think it's too ambitious, and I think it's sort of globally accepted that that is a step too far. But it is important that we understand that globally there's quite a bit of pressure on South Africa to at least be seen to take material steps in that direction. As part of that, the South African government has come up with a whole range of policies on the energy, mainly energy efficiency side, renewable energy side, and on climate change mitigation. In this presentation, the rest of it touches on a couple of those elements. On the policy design in that direction, this was the most coherent picture we could put together. The basic idea is that the drive to mitigate emissions in South Africa stems from the National Climate Change Response White Paper from 2011. As part of that, a concept called carbon budget has been introduced, and the idea is that is sort of a cap, a budget that the country has divided in different sectors, different activities, as to how much greenhouse gas emissions you can emit. Obviously, the budget is lower than the current trend. So, under the carbon budgeting process, as the umbrella, there are a number of policies being implemented or have been implemented to reduce emissions to be able to fit within the proposed carbon budget. How the carbon budgeting process will exactly work is still under design, but some of these policies that fall under it have been implemented or are in the process of being implemented. At the end of the process, the overall end game is that government will measure the actual results of realizing these carbon budgets and use those internally to amend and design new policies, but also to report that internationally as part of its overall climate change obligations. In practice, that means that we, or actually you, along with all other operants in the industrial sector, will be requested to provide more and more information on the energy and fossil fuel consumption you guys take. One of those elements, one of those measures under this carbon budgeting umbrella is the carbon tax. Now, in 2013, during the AGM, I spoke about the basic design of the carbon tax and about what the sort of financial rent and cents implications would be per firing technology, and about the different applications we had made to National Treasury when it comes to changing the design of the policy, which would be the advantage of clay brick makers. Recently, the Davis Tax Committee, which is tasked nationally to look at all of the government regulations currently in place, announced that they would also look at the carbon tax, although their initial mandate was only existing policies. The reason for that was that they had many applications from the private sector to look at that as well. And I think for us, and that's why the CBA is also assisted by EcoMetrix making a submission to the Davis Tax Committee. I think for us it's a good opportunity in the sense that the carbon tax unit within National Treasury, obviously their limited mandate is designing a carbon tax. Whereas a larger discussion can be had about, well, carbon tax and how does that then actually work in the bigger taxation scheme. One of the proposals we're going to make by the end of next week, when the submission has to go in, is that part of the carbon tax that a clay brick maker has to pay as of that's plenty of time. No, we'll be finished. Is that the carbon tax they pay goes into the national coffers and is not recycled back into the industry. Another element, I think we discussed this on several occasions, is that investing in newer innovative technologies in the clay brick industry to move to more efficient technologies presents quite a few hurdles. One of them is that producing bricks with a clamp doesn't require a lot of it doesn't require a lot of capital, but it doesn't require a lot of capital equipment in that sense. Whereas tunnel kilns and other more efficient technologies, BSBK, do require actual technology, actual assets being invested in. So one of the proposals we're going to make to the Davis Tax Committee, since they look at a broader scope from a taxation perspective, is that part of the carbon tax that a clay brick maker should pay is actually recycled back into that clay brick maker's operation. In the sense that if you would pay 100 Rand in carbon tax, but you can demonstrate to SARS that you spent 50 Rand investing in more energy efficient, climate neutral technologies, then you would not have to pay that part of your carbon tax. So a direct circling back of the potential carbon tax expenditure you would have to make. There are other alternatives. Treasury sees it in the sense that now all of the tax goes into the coffers, and there are several programs, 12L, the energy efficiency rebate scheme, the REAP, you could build a wind farm funded from that money, etc., etc. Our concern is that that is much more tailored at the bigger picture as how tax money is spent, and a lot less to how clay brick makers can spend clay brick makers' money in improving their technology. So that's our submission to, well, the basic design of the submission to the Davis Tax Committee. It was touched upon already a little bit. as I just earlier said, before we talked about the carbon tax, the trend to have more policies and more incentives in place when it comes to energy and carbon management will be that different government departments will request or demand more information on your operations and your fuel consumption, electricity consumption, etc., on a more frequent basis. An optimal design is that government asks you this information once and applies that to all the different legislations they are putting in place. That is not how it works. That is not because our government can't do that right. It never works like that. In no country in the world it's organized in that efficient. What we've done is we've designed this model, this tool, sort of an internet portal, which allows you to upload that type of information once. You can store it there and you can review it yourself. And you can then generate the different reports that you need to submit to the different government departments that apply that information for different purposes, but the same objective. We've rolled that model out into 2 different entities so far over the last year and a half. One in the private sector, one in the public sector. And it works quite well. It has several primary advantages. One is that individual users can very easily upload that information. The system checks for all sorts of errors. Differences between kilowatts and megawatts are easily made, and the system flags those as that can't be right. It also allows you to, on an aggregated and anonymous basis, generate sector-specific information, which then, on a plant level, can be used to benchmark yourself against your peer. The model worked quite well, and one of the government entities that uses it for their own internal operations actually got a very nice award a couple of weeks ago in Seoul for being sort of the most innovative tool and application of that tool worldwide. Within I suppose the working group that deals with the carbon tax within the CBA, we've been discussing applying such a model within the CBA, within the clay brick making industry. I suppose 2 primary purposes. One, it would make life easier for a clay brick maker in the sense that more and more information will be requested, which can now be sort of centrally stored, confidential, so there's not that other clay brick makers have access to your electricity bills, but you can generate your own reports from the information you upload, whereas the sector can generate sector benchmark information. These are a couple of screenshots from one of the implemented models. It has obviously 3 sort of basic elements. Somebody logs in, enters information on a monthly or periodical basis, has the option to actually substantiate the information. So instead of only filling in the number, you can also upload the underlying electricity bill or water statement or something like that. Then it goes into the data repository, secured box on the internet, compartmentalized that you can only access your own information. A couple of conversions happen there, from megawatt hours to tons of CO2 emissions, etc. And then it allows you as an end user to generate reports that you can use to make your application for how much carbon tax you will have to pay. It allows you to, there's a whole range of reports that will be requested more and more. Then on the internal side, you can also generate reports where you can see your own performance against the average of the peers, and you can see your own performance develop over time and pick out where points for improvement. That's a basic, quick recap of the model, and I think I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.